He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He just stood there solid, unmoving as the man's hand crept toward his face. Then, from deep within his chest, a sound rose, low, raw, ancient. It wasn't the growl of an ordinary dog. It was the growl of something sent to protect. Within seconds, every coffee cup in the cafe stilled midair. Every eye turned toward the golden retriever and the blind man beside him. No one spoke, and from that moment on, Willow Bend was no longer the peaceful town it used to be. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move, you please give this video a like and consider subscribing. The morning mist in Willow Bend had not yet lifted. It hovered like a soft veil above the cobblestone sidewalks and the sleepy lakefront, casting everything in a silvery glow. The sun was slow to rise this time of year, painting the eastern sky in streaks of gold and lavender. Willow Bend was a quiet town nestled beside Lake Alden in Montana, where locals moved at the rhythm of the seasons and visitors often stumbled into silence, as if the landscape asked for reverence. At the corner table of Lakeside Brew, the town's oldest coffee shop with sun-bleached wood siding and a faded green awning, Eli Thompson sat as he did every morning. Eli was in his early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with skin weathered from years under harsh skies. His eyes, pale and unfocused, gazed toward the lake he could no longer see. A navy blue jacket hung neatly from his frame, and his hands moved with the precision of someone who had learned to live without sight, confident but measured. Next to him, lying alert with a stillness that spoke volumes, was Sunny, a 6-year-old golden retriever. Sunny's coat shimmered like warm honey in the soft light. His build was athletic, his chest wide and legs sturdy, a dog shaped not by leisure but by duty. He had once been a military K-9 trained for detection and protection, but those days had passed. Now, he was Eli's eyes and more than that. He was Eli's shadow, his anchor, his morning sun, to any passerby. They were a picture of peace, the quiet man with the calm dog, sipping black coffee in the early haze. But for those who noticed the details, Sunny's ears twitching at every distant sound, his gaze following shadows as if anticipating movement, it was clear something beneath that surface simmered with alertness. A few storefronts down, Claire Rivers emerged from a narrow side door tucked beside the bookshop she owned, Birch and Quill. She was 27, with long auburn hair swept into a loose braid and a face that held both softness and restraint. Claire was tall, with a graceful, quiet presence and a preference for heavy knit sweaters, worn jeans, and boots dusted in earth from early morning walks. Claire had returned to Willow Bend 2 years prior, leaving behind a life in Missoula no one asked her much about. The town remembered when she was 15 and had survived a hit-and-run that left her with a shattered collarbone and a scar above her right brow. What no one knew, because she never spoke of it, was that a dog had pulled her out of the street seconds before the impact. It vanished before help arrived. Since then, she'd never quite looked at animals the same. That morning, as Claire swept dry leaves from the bookshop steps, her gaze drifted across the street toward Lakeside Brew. She saw Eli first, then Sunny, his posture tense, ears forward, tail flat against the wooden floorboards. It wasn't the posture of a dog at ease. Something had caught him. Claire froze slightly, broom halfway through its arc. She had seen that stance before. She watched longer than she intended, until a sudden, sharp rev of motorcycle engines cut through the morning. 3 motorcycles rolled into town, their chrome gleaming in the pale sun. The roar fractured the silence like a stone through glass. The bikers parked diagonally in front of the cafe, dismounting with careless confidence. Their leather jackets were adorned with bold patches flames, skulls, thunderbolts, and they spoke too loudly for the quietness of the street. Sonny rose immediately to his feet. His tail remained low. His stance widened. His gaze followed the biker's every movement. But he did not growl. Not yet. Claire leaned subtly against the doorframe, watching from a distance. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she saw how one of them pointed at Sonny, laughing. Another mimicked a barking dog, slapping his thigh. The third one, taller, darker, with a shaved head and a heavy stride, took a step too close to Eli's table. Sonny shifted his weight forward, eyes unblinking. Eli, though blind, sensed it. His hand moved calmly to Sonny's neck, fingers resting against the thick fur. "Easy," he murmured. The bikers laughed again and moved on, their boots echoing down the sidewalk. But Sonny didn't sit back down. He stood, unmoving, watching the street even after they were gone. Claire watched too, her heart oddly tight. She hadn't meant to care. But something about the way Sonny stood there reminded her too much of another dog. Long ago, in the blur before headlights. Her eyes drifted to Eli, who gently sipped his coffee, his expression unreadable. Claire stepped back inside the bookshop slowly, her mind still lingering on the street. She didn't know who Eli was, but she knew this dogs didn't stand like that unless they remembered something the rest of us forgot. The wind had shifted by mid-morning, carrying with it the edge of an early winter chill that slid in from the lake. Willow Bend's usual warmth, the kind built from neighborly waves and familiar footsteps, seemed to be holding its breath. The leaves on the maples shivered in the place at Lakeside Brew. The usual clink of mugs and low conversations were now muted, as if the air itself had thickened with tension. Eli sat still in his usual seat, the ceramic mug warm in his hands. Though his grip was tighter today, he hadn't moved much since the bikers arrived. And neither had Sonny, who stood now instead of lying by his feet, body coiled like a spring. His ears shifted with every sound. His gaze locked onto the group of men lounging just beyond the cafe's patio fence. Travis Dalton, the tall, broad-chested biker with a shaved head and leather vest marked Ravager's MC, stood closest. He had a cocky swagger to his movements, and a grin that never quite reached his eyes. His boots were planted firmly on the pavement as he leaned against a motorcycle, with matte black paint and red flames curling down the gas tank. Still standing there like a statue. "Huh," Travis called out toward Sonny, his tone half laugh, half dare. A few heads turned from nearby tables. The atmosphere shifted. Sonny didn't move. His eyes, amber and unblinking, stayed locked. Eli's brow tightened. "We're not looking for trouble," he said aloud, voice even. "Please give my dog space." Travis ignored him. "He looks smart. What if I test that?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Then, in one fluid motion, he walked over and crouched too close and extended a hand toward Sonny's face. A few bystanders gasped. One woman clutched her bag closer. Sonny remained still, but his nostrils flared and a low, nearly inaudible growl vibrated in his chest. The leash twitched in Eli's grip. "What the hell are you doing?" someone finally said from a corner table. It was Helen Marsh, a retired librarian in her early 70s, thin as a rake and known for speaking her mind. She wore a deep green wool coat and always carried a hand-embroidered canvas bag filled with crossword books. She had been watching the entire interaction through narrowed eyes. You don't touch a service animal, ever. Travis smirked and stood up, shrugging. Relax. It's just a dog. Helen scoffed and turned her attention back to her tea, muttering something about idiots raised in barns. Eli had stayed composed through it all, but inside, a quiet alarm had started to ring. Sonny had never reacted this way before, not even in crowded airports, at fireworks shows, or near panicked crowds. Something about this group about Travis had set him on edge, across the street. Claire Rivers had stepped just outside the door of her bookstore, holding a to-go coffee and a phone she hadn't meant to use. But as soon as she saw Travis lean toward Sonny, she instinctively raised the phone and captured a photo his hand near the dog's face, the dog's rigid body. The way Eli reached out a hand protectively. Claire wasn't usually impulsive. She lived quietly, kept to herself. But her gut knew something was off. And her gut had been right before, back when headlights came too fast down a gravel road, and only a growl in the dark saved her life. That afternoon, Claire didn't return to shelving new releases or labeling holiday bookmarks. Instead, she locked up early and walked to the sheriff's station on the north end of Main Street. It was a modest building, red brick with a chipped sign and a porch swing out front. Inside sat Sheriff Joe Mallory, a man in his late 50s with a deep tan, a weathered face, and the steady eyes of someone who'd seen too much but lost none of his steadiness. He wore a brown canvas jacket with his badge pinned on the left pocket, and he was halfway through a thermos of strong coffee when Claire walked in. "Miss Rivers," he said, setting it down, "everything all right?" Claire hesitated, then took a seat. "I think someone in town is dangerous, and I think he's been dangerous before." She opened her phone and slid it across the desk. "This man. His name is Travis Dalton." Joe leaned forward. The photo showed Travis crouched next to Eli's service dog, a look of mischief, just shy of menace on his face. "He came into town yesterday, caused a bit of a stir." Joe's voice was flat. Claire nodded. "I think I've seen him before, years ago. I was hit by a motorcycle outside Missoula. The driver never stopped. I never saw his face. But the helmet had the same emblem he's got on his jacket. I remember it red lightning through a skull." Joe studied the screen again, jaw tightening. Then his eyes shifted to the dog in the photo. "I'll be damned," he murmured. "That's Sonny." Claire blinked. "You know him. I trained him. Back when I was still doing canine units before taking the badge. That dog found 2 IEDs in Afghanistan, saved 8 soldiers in one sweep." His voice grew quieter. "He's got better instincts than most people I know." Joe stood, walked over to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder. "You said his name's Travis Dalton." Claire nodded. Joe flipped through the files, pulled one halfway out, scanned a page. "Travis Dalton. Suspicion of assault 2 years ago in Billings. No conviction. Fled the scene of an altercation involving a minor injury to a woman outside a bar. Motorcycle gang affiliation. Ravagers MC." He looked up. "Your instincts were right." Claire leaned back, arms crossed tightly. "What do we do?" Joe closed the folder. Eyes focused. "We watch. We wait. And if that dog growls again..." "I'm listening." Willow Bend folded into darkness with a quiet finality that night. The stars were hidden behind a thick blanket of low clouds, and the moon, usually a silver sentinel above Lake Alden, had vanished from the sky altogether. the town's familiar shapes blurred into shadows, the air dense with the scent of pine and cold stone. It was the kind of night where even the wind held its breath. In a modest second-floor apartment above the town's old post office, Eli Thompson sat in his armchair, one hand resting on the thick fur of his companion. Sunny. The lights were off. Not that it mattered. Eli moved through darkness in all its forms. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the old radiator and the occasional rustle of Sunny shifting on the rug near the door. But tonight, Sunny hadn't been still. His posture was taut, head raised, ears flicking toward sounds outside, subtle ones that Eli couldn't place. Eli frowned. "What is it?" "Boy," he whispered. Sunny didn't bark. Not yet. But a low rumble vibrated from his chest, one that Eli felt more than heard. Then came the noise, distant at first, then closer, the unmistakable growl of a motorcycle engine cutting through the silence like a blade. It slowed as it approached the building. Eli stood slowly and moved to the door, placing his hand against the solid wood frame. Sunny rose beside him, his body tense. The engine stopped just outside. Then silence. No footsteps, no knock, just quiet. Eli's breathing grew shallower. He reached for his phone, fingers brushing against the familiar pattern of raised dots he'd placed on key buttons, but before he could dial, Sunny let out a bark, short, sharp, commanding. It echoed through the apartment. Eli froze. Outside. Faint shuffling on the gravel. A boot scuff. Then something softer, a hand dragging along the outer wall, tracing the siding like a question. Sunny snarled now, his voice fuller, deeper, reverberating through Eli's chest like a warning bell. "Who's there?" Eli called out. Voice tight. No answer. He waited. Another noise, a click. Perhaps a lighter, or a knife flicked open in the dark. Then, from below, a siren distant but rising. Someone had called it in. The shuffling stopped. The engine started again, this time peeling away with reckless speed. Sunny charged to the door, barking twice before falling into silence. Eli hesitated before opening it. When he finally did, he found nothing but cold air and a scrap of the paper fluttering against the door frame. He reached out and peeled it free. The tape brittle. The handwriting jagged. He couldn't see it. Of course, but he recognized letters by texture, by pressure, the indentation of a heavy hand. The next morning, Claire Rivers stood by the window at Lakeside Brew, holding a mug of mint tea between both hands. Her auburn hair was loose today, falling across her shoulder in quiet waves. Her face was pale, unreadable. Eli arrived precisely at 8:02, just as he always did. Sunny, calm again, led him to their usual table. Claire hesitated, then crossed the room with a careful resolve. "Eli," she asked, stopping beside him. He turned his head slightly. "Claire, do you mind if I join you for a moment?" He gestured to the chair across from him, and Sunny shifted to lie at his feet, eyes following Claire as she sat. For a moment, she said nothing. "I heard a bike last night," she finally said, "a few blocks from my place, then this morning." Someone said police drove through Main Street. Eli nodded once. "He was outside my apartment. I don't know what he wanted." Claire gripped the mug tighter. "I think I do." Eli tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" Claire took a deep breath. "When I was 15, I was hit by a motorcycle. The driver never stopped. All I remember is red paint, a Thunderbolt decal, and a helmet covered in flames. I was thrown into a ditch outside Missoula. I would have died, if not for a dog. I don't know where he came from, just a golden blur pulling me away. Eli said nothing. Claire continued. Her voice quieter now. I looked at that biker the other day, Travis. His jacket has that same emblem, the same lightning. It's him. Eli, I'm sure of it. Eli leaned back in his chair. You think he came here because of you. I think he came here looking for trouble. And I think Sonny knows it. Sonny let out a soft huff, as if in agreement. His tail thumped once against the wood. Claire reached into her coat pocket and placed a small folded photo on the table. I gave this to Joe. It's him, crouching too close to Sonny. You can see the look in the dog's eyes. That's not fear. That's instinct. Eli unfolded the paper, fingers moving over the surface. Joe said he used to work with Sonny. Claire nodded. He trained him. He said Sonny saved soldiers overseas, that he was retired early because he'd done more than his part. Eli's mouth tightened. And now he's protecting me. Maybe both of us, Claire said. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the wind had picked up again, brushing dry leaves across the cobblestones like whispers no one wanted to hear. Eli reached down and scratched behind Sonny's ear. I found a note taped to my door, he said finally. Claire looked up sharply. Eli's voice was steady, but grim. It said, "Good dog," but you can't see. Claire's eyes went wide. That's a threat. Eli nodded. That's how it felt. Sonny shifted again, placing one paw across Eli's boot as if anchoring him to the earth. Eli reached down, placing his hand over the paw, I think, he said softly. That whatever's coming next. Sonny already knows it's not over. Late Saturday afternoon, stretched over Willow Bend in a wash of gold and long shadows. Families gathered in Maple Park, where the last of the autumn leaves clung to branches like reluctant memories. The children's laughter mingled with the rustling of the breeze, and from the food stand at the park's south edge, the scent of fresh popcorn and warm cider curled through the air. Eli Thompson made his way slowly along the gravel path that traced the perimeter of the park, guided by the rhythmic pace of Sonny, whose golden fur gleamed in the sinking light. The dog's gait was alert but not rushed, his ears pivoting with every distant voice and shifting leaf. Sonny didn't simply guide, he scanned, sensed, absorbed. He was more than a seeing-eye dog. He was a sentry wrapped in warmth. Eli was dressed in his usual understated way, a dark fleece jacket zipped to the collar, well-fitted jeans, and boots that found the earth with calm purpose. His cane tapped steadily, more habit than necessity, with Sonny leading him. He wasn't unaware of his surroundings. He had learned long ago that being blind didn't mean being unarmed, especially not when you had a dog who could read tension before it spoke. Nearby, Nora Gleason, the town's music teacher, watched from a park bench. A woman in her late 40s with tightly curled auburn hair and a long olive coat. Nora was known for her sharp intuition and her soft way of speaking. She was reading a book about Appalachian folk songs, but her eyes occasionally lifted to scan the crowd. She had seen Eli walking here more frequently, and she'd noticed something else, how Sonny never relaxed like he used to. Then came the unmistakable staccato growl of a motorcycle engine. The sound cut through the air like a snapped string. Several parents turned their heads. A few children stopped mid-play. From the east entrance of the park, Travis Dalton appeared, straddling a black and red bike, his leather vest loose over a dark thermal shirt, boots heavy and scuffed. His face wore a grin that didn't match the mood of the afternoon. He didn't park. Instead, he rolled onto the paved path that wove through the park's edge, idling beside a grove of birch trees until he spotted Eli and Sonny. Then, with deliberate slowness, he stepped off the bike and walked forward. Sonny stopped. His entire body froze. His tail dropped. His shoulders squared. Eli, sensing the sudden pause, whispered, "What is it?" "Boy." Then he heard the footsteps. Heavy, confident. "Nice day for a walk," Travis said, his voice lazy, almost amused. Eli turned his head slightly. "You shouldn't be here." Travis laughed. Neither should half these people. Life doesn't always follow rules. He took a step closer. Sonny's growl rumbled into the open. Not sharp, but deep and rising. A few people nearby noticed. A young man in a green hoodie raised his phone and began recording, uncertain of what he was seeing but sensing it was important. "I don't want any trouble," Eli said, his voice steady. "But you got it anyway," Travis muttered, and without warning, shoved Eli hard at the shoulder. He underestimated Sonny. The golden retriever moved like light. In one motion, he sprang forward, inserting himself between Travis and Eli, his snarl echoing like thunder. His teeth bared, not snapping, but warning. His stance was unmoving, rigid as stone. Eyes locked on Travis like a living firewall. A dozen phones now recorded. People gasped. Some shouted for help. "Get back!" A voice rang out. Claire Rivers was there, breathless from running across the park. She wore a gray scarf, loosely wrapped, and her cheeks were flushed from both the cold and fury. "Travis Dalton!" she shouted. "Step away from him." Travis turned, face pale now. His name hung in the air like a shot. Then came sirens. A patrol car turned the corner of the playground, from the passenger side. Deputy Casey Vance emerged, a solid-built man in his early 30s with short blonde hair and a military stride. He moved quickly, hand at his belt but weapon holstered. "Hands where I can see them," he barked. Travis raised his palms. "I didn't touch the dog." "No," said a voice behind Casey, but he pushed the man. It was Nora Gleason. She had her arms crossed and her phone raised. "I got the whole thing. In minutes. It was done." Travis was cuffed, escorted to the cruiser, and driven away under the glare of a dozen witnesses and more than 20 phone cameras. Later that evening, in the sheriff's station, Sheriff Joe Mallory reviewed the footage with a quiet heaviness. Claire stood across from him, her arms folded. "That's him," she said. "Same face, same eyes. He was the one who hit me when I was a teenager. The patch on the jacket, it was burned into my memory." Joe nodded. "The video helps. Sonny's reaction, his positioning it all confirms your timeline." He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen lightly on the desk. "You know, I trained that dog for high-pressure raids. He only steps between someone and danger when he's absolutely sure it's not a drill." He looked up at her. "That's the second time he's saved someone from Travis Dalton." Claire exhaled slowly, and hopefully the last. The chill of early November softened beneath a rare morning sun as Willow Bend awoke with a sigh of relief. The narrow streets, still lined with amber leaves and frost-kissed windows, breathed easier now, no longer shadowed by the presence of Travis Dalton. The incident at Maple Park had passed through every corner of town, carried in whispers and cell phone videos, and yet, like any storm that comes and goes, the town found its rhythm again, but different, deeper, changed. Eli Thompson now walked through town not as just the quiet blind man with a good dog, but as someone the community paused for, greeted, checked on, smiled at with recognition. He could feel it in the pauses of voices as he passed, in the extra warmth of good morning from baristas at Lakeside Brew, and in the way children quieted when they saw Sonny. Before reaching out a tentative hand toward the golden-furred legend, Sonny, for his part, took it all in with composed grace. At 7 years old now, the golden retriever bore no medals, but his stride was dignified, his gaze steady. The faint scars on his paw pads, some from war zones. Others from sidewalks, were unseen beneath fur, but not unfelt. He still moved with purpose, but the tight vigilance had relaxed. The threat had passed, at least for now. That morning, as always. Eli sat on the bench near the fountain in the center of the town square. The warm thermos of coffee balanced on his knee. Sunny curled at his feet like a golden flame. The fountain's water murmured softly nearby. The sound of calm. Chapter 6. A voice called out. Cheerful and familiar, Claire Rivers appeared from the front steps of the library, a novel in hand. Her cardigan wrapped tight against the breeze. Her auburn hair was tucked beneath a knitted beret, and a satchel full of books swung at her side. Claire had a glow about her now, not loud, but warm. Something in her had softened since that day at the park, or perhaps not softened, but settled like a wound that had finally scarred over. "Bring it on," Eli smiled. Claire took her usual seat beside him, flipping the book open with a practiced touch. She had started visiting him every morning 2 weeks ago, a habit born from shared trauma and quiet trust. She read aloud with clarity, her voice dancing easily between dialogue and narration. At first, it had been old thrillers, but now she'd begun bringing him her favorite classics. Memoirs, even poetry on quiet days. Today's book was East of Eden, and her voice carried the depth of Steinbeck's valleys into the town square like him. As Claire read, the world slowed. Passers-by moved quieter when they neared the bench. Not wishing to interrupt, some even lingered a few minutes. Drawn by the unspoken comfort the sight gave a woman reading, a man listening, a dog at peace. No cameras, no spectacle, just something true. From the far end of the square, Mayor Ruth Campbell approached slowly. Ruth was in her early 60s, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver-gray hair cut short and practical. She was known for her blunt kindness and sharp memory, the kind of mayor who remembered the birthdays of shopkeepers and which brand of cookies your grandmother liked. She carried a paper folder tucked under one arm and walked with the slight sway of someone whose knees had been through a few too many county fairs. When she reached the bench, she waited for Claire to finish a sentence before clearing her throat gently. "Forgive me," Ruth said. "Didn't mean to interrupt your chapter." Claire looked up, smiling. "You never interrupt." "Ruth, just enhance the plot." The mayor chuckled. "You're too quick for your own good." Eli tilted his head. "Morning. Mayor. Morning. Eli. Morning. Sunny," she added. Reaching to gently scratch the dog behind his ear, Sunny blinked up at her with calm acceptance. "I have something I'd like to ask." She continued. "Well, more like propose." Eli straightened slightly. "Go ahead." Ruth held out the folder. Claire accepted it and opened it slowly, revealing a sketch pencil drawn, clean lines of a sculpture. It showed a golden retriever in a seated position, one paw extended as if mid-step, the other curled beneath, ears perked, gaze ahead. Claire let out a breath. "We'd like to place it in front of the library," Ruth said. "We've got approval from the council. No cost to you, just a quiet tribute. A reminder." Eli ran his fingers over the sketch. "A statue." "Yes." Ruth said of Sunny. Claire's eyes glistened, but she kept her voice light. "He deserves it." Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said softly, "There's a quote I think about sometimes. I don't remember who said it, but it goes, 'Not all who walk in the dark are lost.' and not all who see can lead the way. Claire reached over, gently placing her hand on his. I know that one. Ruth smiled. We were thinking of engraving. Not everyone who sees the light leads, but some who don't see still guide us home. Eli nodded. That's better. Sonny, as if on cue, stood and stretched, his tail sweeping slowly. The breeze carried the church bell's distant chime somewhere down the street. A child laughed. A few days later, the statue was approved. The townspeople came together in a quiet ceremony, no speeches, just candles, children petting the real Sonny who stood nearby with a blue ribbon around his neck, and a hush of respect. Sometimes the brightest light comes from those who walk in darkness. In Eli's world, it wasn't sight that guided him, it was trust, loyalty, and the quiet miracles that often come in the shape of a golden furred friend. Sonny wasn't just a dog. He was a guardian sent at the right time, a reminder that God often works through the most unexpected vessels. There's a divine thread woven through even the smallest acts of protection and love, just like Sonny stood between danger and peace. Maybe each of us has a calling to stand for someone else, to be the calm in their chaos, the shield in their storm, whether we see it or not. God places protectors among us, human or animal, as living proof that faith is never alone. In our everyday lives, we may not face men like Travis or moments of crisis in a quiet park, but we do face fear, doubt, and loneliness. And in those times, we are reminded you don't need to see the light to be someone else's light. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect, to comment Amen if you believe God places His angels in many forms, sometimes with pause. Share this story with someone who needs hope. Subscribe to the channel to hear more stories of love, redemption, and unexpected miracles. And may God bless you, your home, and all those who stand by you seen or unseen.